Private Dan Blacker, just having cut down a horde of angry zombies, hastily entered the camp's munitions hut to stock up on weaponry for what might be coming next. He grabbed a small bag and filled it with grenades, a pistol, ammunition, and then, knowing that the rounds for the Tommy gun he had in his pockets would only get him so far, he eyed off a Nambu Type 99 machine gun, which, although large and would hinder his ability to move swiftly, would ensure that he would be able to cut through anything that got in his way. As he stepped down from the hut, he found himself facing one of the zombies he had shot only moments earlier. Staring it down, he fired off a round from the Type 99. The high-velocity bullet tore its head off, and Blacker stood silently with a wry smile as it fell to the ground, satisfied that this time it was done. He didn't waste time checking on the others. Getting to higher ground was now his priority, and in the distance was the highest point he could see. Once loaded with weaponry, he left the camp and made his way deeper into the damp, dark jungle. The terrain was steep and difficult to traverse, however he pushed on, knowing he had no other choice but to keep moving and attempt to gain a strategic advantage. Then he stopped. Over the sound of the insects and his breathing, he could hear the thumping of something large pushing its way through the jungle below. He moved silently to the edge to see if he could make out what it was, or at the very least, stay the hell away from it. Through the trees under the moonlight, he could make out the silhouette of a huge goliath-like creature, slowly pacing its way through the jungle towards the camp he had just vacated. Sweet Jesus, Blacker croaked to himself. What the hell is this? Convinced it wasn't friendly, the last thing he wanted to do right now was disturb it, so he silently crept back into the jungle and continued to hike up the incline. Unfortunately for him, his focus was still on what was behind him, and not what was now staring him right in the face. Another huge beast stood directly in front of him, its hulking figure taking up his entire field of vision. Once it realized it was looking at fresh meat, it screamed a frenzied, savage cry. Blacker opened fire and tore into the giant's chest with a barrage of bullets. This did little more than make it angrier, which evoked an even louder and more chilling howl. Blacker raised his weapon higher and sent a volley of hot lead into its face. Its head tore open and it fell to the ground, dead. Blacker stood still and stared at the mess in front of him. The mess of bone, blood, and brain spilled out and pooled around his boots. Then from behind him, a crash of trees and a scream for what he could only assume was from the first one he saw. It was now coming his way. He moved quickly, further up the hill, further into the darkness. He had to keep moving and find a safe haven. Several extremely tense hours later, exhausted and dehydrated, he had reached the summit and an abandoned lookout within which he took shelter as the morning sky above threatened rain at any moment. Exhausted, he sat in silence trying to figure out his next move and somehow make sense of the nightmare he'd woken up into, ever alert to the fact that something could ambush him at any time. The earthy and damp smell of the jungle in the cool morning air was replaced by the acrid smell of mold and gunpowder as he looked around the small concrete room, hoping for any sign that would help him understand where he was and where he needed to get to. Having come up empty-handed, he then stared out over the vast jungle below, now able to make out more of the landscape as the darkness slowly faded into light. At the base of the hill was a huge concrete installation, and beyond that, an airfield. His mind was now racing. Surely somewhere in the airfield control tower would be maps. Maps that would help him determine where he was in the world. And once he knew that, he would once again try to raise a distress call. The silence was suddenly broken by the sound of something else. He sat as still as he could, trying to figure out which direction it come from. However, there was nothing else, and he began to question his sanity through a conversation with the voices in his head. Silently, he exited his shelter and looked for a way down the hill. There was no easy path. He would have to take extreme care to not slip and fall to his death. It was as if he had willed the worst possible outcome as the ground below him gave way, sending an avalanche of earth and stone crashing down the sheer side of the hill. Blacker had managed to cling to some exposed tree roots, just enough to ensure he didn't join the rocks and mud below. Looking down, he could now see the side of the concrete block. Squinting, he felt ill with unease as he made out the words United States Penitentiary in huge letters painted on the side of the wall below. He read it again, and then again to be sure. These words hit Blacker like a rifle butt to the face as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Realizing that the only way out of this was up, he began to try and pull himself up to what he thought was the safety of the ground above.